Welcome to The Longer Game. If you're listening to a show about retail being reimagined. If you'd like to connect with The Longer Game, look for The Longer Game at thelongergame.com and on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn at The Longer Game. We're here to talk about retail, why it's changing, how it's changing, and what you can expect in the future. We're not trying to take ourselves too seriously, but we do want to know what that retail landscape is going to look like. I hope you enjoy your time listening to this podcast. We try to keep it as quick as possible because we don't want to waste your time, but we want to keep you informed. Thanks for tuning in. Now, here's the show. All right, everybody, welcome to The Longer Game. I have my guest, Ryan Cramer, here. Ryan is a man of many talents. Probably has lots of talents that I don't even know about, but currently he is the partnership manager at Ping Pong Payments. Did I get that right?
That's correct. It's one of many hats I wear.
What other hats do you wear? Like Seattle Seahawks, Marvel Comics?
The ones I have that are not work related would be, I'm a big fan of the Chicago Cubs and Colts.
Okay.
So I have those hats. I have an Adidas hat, which is more like a sweat wicking hat. Like you can see me right now. I'm like working all day in the sun and it's like so hot.
Do you have windows going directly into your?
I do. I
room?
change.
Okay.
This is the thing about working from home full time. You get a little antsy and you're like, I don't like what I stare at all day. So I'm going to just like stare outside. So I literally changed my whole office around so I would be able to stare outside and have natural light come in. So
I have natural lighting right here, but right about 5, 6, 7, depending upon the time of year, I have like light right in my eyes. So if I'm having a call at that time, I probably should reschedule. But I don't.
Right. Well, that's also good to know if you're a listener and you or you can't see Michael. If you are watching him, it's a good reminder, right? That if I see my son coming home from school on the bus, I'm like, oh, well, it's well into the afternoon right now. Maybe I should like start to wrap things up and spend time with family. But other than that, yeah, it's other hats. I would say, yeah, I think that's the many hats I wear. Of course, everything that they asked me to do, podcast host, webinar person, close deals, all that fun stuff. It's almost like you become a Swiss Army knife of your company because, as you know, as an industry where you may not have many people, you might have a lot of people who can pull from different aspects of their background. But then you can apply that to cool and creative natures for your business whenever needed.
The industry that I predominantly come from, the Amazon service industry, it's a really holistic system. So everything is integrated into one space. To really manage and grow a business on there, you have to have, I wouldn't say be a jack of all trades, master of none, but you typically have to have a wide array of knowledge that you can bring together because there's so many different components. So also in a small business, wearing a lot of hats, if you're a founder out there, you could be handling sales and marketing for your team, or you could be handling sales and content, and someone else is handling marketing, and someone handles distribution, whatever the case might be. So used to wearing a lot of hats.
Absolutely. Well, and that's the thing, right? Is like people are continuing to grow, but innovating and trying to push the boundaries, especially with any sort of growth. If they can't do it by themselves, or they have to do it by themselves, that's the time aspect of the business. You have to kind of be an entrepreneur. You have to be a little bit of everything. Payroll. You have to be innovator. You have to be logistics and customer service. You have to be all those things.
What happens if you get to a place and you're like, I know nothing about this? Then what do you do?
I am, depending on the situation, I am one person who will admit that I do not know, but I will find out or I will ask. I don't like it when people just blow smoke, wherever.
On the kind of smoke, but yeah.
Right. I mean, but to be honest, like in order, if someone's asking that question, they either want they want the most honest feedback or they want an actual answer. It's not something that you can just make up. And if you make it up, they're going to ask why. And it gets tricky, but that's kind of the mentality I do. If I don't know anything, I will let you know how I will find out for you. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So to frame this conversation, The Longer Game is all about Retail Reimagined. We are literally trying to look into the future of what retail will look like. So that means brick and mortar. That means e-commerce, Amazon specifically, other marketplaces. There are a lot of channels out there. And that's one of the things that Ryan's company, Ping Pong Payments, actually helps say that 5 times fast. They help with interactions with different marketplaces, with different countries, making sure you get the best exchange rate for your money. And so that's something that's really integral to all these different marketplaces, but also expanding internationally is another place where a lot of brands are going. They maybe feel like they've maxed out growth on the US marketplace, or they're just wanting to get involved in other marketplaces sooner than everyone else. Amazon US, last I checked, did about 147 billion in retail sales. I think it was in 2020. The next closest marketplace behind that was Germany at about 27 billion. So I mean, it's not a small number in Germany, but there's a big gap there. UK, Japan, other marketplaces internationally are coming behind that and getting people interested in growing. I know at my agency, we've launched someone in Singapore. We're looking at launching people in Australia. And it really just is, where does the product make sense? There are so many marketplaces in Europe as well. I don't know how much you integrate with those, but so many marketplaces in Europe that are very, very specific. Like, people go to bowl.com for some reason. There's a lot of different marketplaces that people will be on just for specific items, like fashion, whatever the case might be.
Right.
What do you know about that? And I think what part of what I wanted to talk with you about is expanding internationally. That's something that has become, the internet has made a lot of things more accessible. Expanding internationally is more accessible now. However, you still have to go through customs. You still have to deal with the rules and laws of the country you're going into. Even Canada into the US, a lot of dietary differences between the FDA and whatever the, Canada's national governing body over food and drugs are.
Mhm.
Maybe it's the CDA. I don't know. But talk to me about international marketplaces and what that landscape looks like, and it's become more accessible, but you still have barriers to entry.
Yeah, so setting the table, I love that question, and this podcast is really cool and unique. If one of the first times talking about this, we can kind of get predictive and we can kind of throw stuff out there, right? We've seen the
Yep.
industry grow in so much in this landscape in the ways that I would have never thought before, right? I my background entails more direct to consumer. Back in 2014 and 15, it was a whole working for a wholesaler and then finding ways to get our products in the hands of consumer without obviously directly selling to another business. And it was a
So
lot of
that was probably brand new for that business. Used to going B2B, now trying to go
right.
direct to
Yeah,
consumer.
so
Okay.
they were a home gift garden company, number one flag retailer in garden flags, garden stands. Really, probably 10,000. I think 10,000 SKUs annually that they would come out with,
Any
like
flags of
like
gnomes?
yes, and gnomes. Yes. So
Okay.
we're talking. Yeah, the company was called is called. It's still around. Hasn't gone anywhere. It's Evergreen Enterprises out of Richmond, Virginia. I've learned so much from that company. Going directly and seeing the transition from selling directly to as a wholesale business, manufacturing in China, and then distributing through Richmond, Virginia, which is where we were based out of, to different. There was salespeople that were going down to different retail locations. They were selling out
Okay.
of catalogs that evolved over to digital catalogs that evolved to showrooms, um, placing orders digitally on websites and whatnot. So I got to see that evolved on the B2B side, but also on the direct to consumer in conjunction, selling under different brands on Amazon to different retail locations, or I should say marketplaces like Wayfair, Zulily, QVC. There were so many different ways that I would have to look at it and say I was not part of all of those, but I could look at it and see, oh my gosh, there's so many different opportunities, right? It's almost like social
QVC is
media.
still a really big channel. I mean, I don't know how
QVC
much
is
revenue they do, but it's still
lots,
big.
shockingly, and not shouldn't be surprisingly lots. I don't have a number to tell you. It's not Amazon numbers, but think about this. It's a lot of people still have market share in television. They have market share
Yeah.
online. They still do a lot online, but it's like those quick hit digital sales, deals and whatnot. Like now it's only like three payments of this, and it feels comical in that regards, but people they buy it.
People still
Otherwise,
buy
yeah,
it.
what others want to be around. But as the industry has evolved more into private label, more people can just surpass everything and kind of directly work with a manufacturer, distributor, and build their own brand. It's really cool to see it grow. But now I think that the space where we've been in, for lack of COVID and pandemicness going on
Yeah.
or not, it sped up a lot of where the trajectory of this business is going, right? Retail is never going away. I don't think it will ever die out, and I would assume you would agree with me,
I'm very
Michael.
much in agreement of that. And even though I say I'm in agreement with that because e-commerce has grown a lot, but
Mhm.
people want a tactile experience. They still want to try things on sometimes. They want to feel the item. That's why when you put a 360 image on a can of bug spray on Amazon and it increases the conversion rate by 10%, I think that's telling you that.
Right. Well, and also like people need to know what it looks and feels like. Again, you're talking about soft goods. You need to know that it's going to fit your obnoxiously like small or large feet, or something
Yeah.
like that, where you feel like very self conscious about this. When I shop online, that's I know for a fact that's how I feel. I'm like, what if I buy this? It doesn't fit right. Of course, I
Well,
can
many companies,
return it and
especially
also.
clothes, they have different sizes. I might get a large in one brand and an XL in another brand. So it's hard to know because nothing's standardized there.
Exactly, and that's what is in the back of every person's mind. Now, if you go to the same brand over and over, customer loyalty, you know for a
Yeah,
fact that oh, yeah, of course, like I know it's going to feel this way. And e-commerce has gotten better. Like this is the dimensions of what a large is. To me, that that's neither here nor there. That's really still hard to feel like what it actually sits on your body, how it feels and makes you feel.
sure. And Stitch
Um,
Fix like will give you the return label inside of there
Oh
as an
yeah, I
example
was
to just send it
big
right
big
back.
fan of Stitch Fix. They did a good job. Like I actually, it's pretty in depth. I used their service just to try it out. My wife loved it. If it
I
didn't
love the
fit right,
note. I love the
yeah,
note that they like, "Hey,
curated by
Ryan,
you for
I'm
you.
really excited. Yeah, I think you're going to love this." My wife did one for my daughter because they have a kids box and they send 10 items
Mhm.
and it was actually cheaper just to buy all of them because my daughter liked
It
a lot of
always
them.
is. That's how they do it.
But right, of course. And in the letter, it said, Daphne, we're really excited about your trip to Charleston because that's what my wife put in there.
Mhm.
One of her friends, and she's 8, complimented and said, I love your shirt. And she said, oh, my designer picked it out.
Isn't that funny how kids can like, oh yeah, my personal designer left me
Oh, I
notes
mean, they
and
just
I
pick it
look
up
good
like
on the
that.
beach with this. Exactly. Well, and like as we didn't have that as kids, like there wasn't that sense of you would say like, did you see that commercial of that toy? And that's what a lot of us were like, oh yeah, I
Yeah.
have to have that. And like we all had the same toys or whatnot, but
Or you
now
just
it's
went to
that
J.C.
feeling.
Penney and had to try on clothes, and your parents were like, this is what we're getting.
Yeah, and that's what you're getting. But I mean, now it's easy to share and see what's trending, right? Like as kids, we didn't know, had no idea. There's only one source, television or radio or whatever that might be. Now there's social media. There's all these different ways to access outside trends and whatnot. It's a little hard to navigate. But I guess back to the original point of like expansion, right? We've expanded our offering in general with retail now going global, where you can have small and medium-sized businesses, their products who only used to be able to sell it in the Midwest, for example,
Right.
where you and I are, to now on the other side of the world at a snap of a finger, in theory. You that's unbelievable, and that's transformed over the last 15 or so years. But most recently, just this rocket ship, if you will, and growth fast forwardness that we have had with COVID and supply chain problems and all this different things where you're almost forced to find different ways to spend your money and to continue on with life. That's the nuances that we've seen have fast forwarded. You've seen e-commerce become what retail is and will have its basis in, but people understand, hey, I can not just buy like tchotchke gift stuff online. I can now buy groceries, I can buy services, I can
Yeah.
telehealth, I can do all these different fascinating things.
Well,
And that is
telehealth has
where
been around for
right.
a long time, but the pandemic again just accelerated that growth. So, I mean, I was meeting my psychiatrist who I meet with regularly because
Mhm.
I deal with depression, anxiety. Let's just be honest about that, people. It's under control now, so I'm good. Don't worry about me. But I just would meet with him regularly instead of having to go to his office 30 minutes away. To meet with him was really easy, and it saved the commute time. I think that's pretty revolutionary. But when we talk about expanding internationally,
Mhm.
it is much easier. I think the flip
Right.
side is I have a friend who trademarked a term, entrepreneur porn. I don't know if you've ever heard me say that or anybody else say that.
I have not.
Entrepreneur porn is the guy in the nice suit who is telling people he charges $10,000 an hour and has a nice car. He rented this Lamborghini, but he's pretending it's his. He's got the women in the house. I won't name names, but you see commercials on YouTube of, look at this, man. This is my house. This is so cool. Everything's great. I'm an entrepreneur. I don't know any entrepreneurs that live like that. And if they do, they're living large for a very short time or they're renting everything. It's hard
Right.
work to grow and build a business. And so the flip side of that is, yes, it's much easier, and that's kind of the exciting part because you can expand anywhere. But there are a lot of difficulties, even just going from the United States to Canada, let's say on Amazon. There are things that are required there that most people don't know. We know the Food and Drug Administration here. We know that there's customs. We know that there's certain regulations when it comes to dietary supplements, different products, things like that. We know it's illegal and legal. When you go over to Canada, what are some of the difficulties that you see that brands are facing that maybe are not as noticeable? We know you're going to have to collect some kind of sales tax in Europe, or
Mhm.
in the UK it's usually called VAT tax, and I think it's similar in other places. But do you know a lot of those issues? And if so, talk about some of those issues that people are facing, and that when someone comes to the table, they need to have prepared to be ready.
Yeah, good question. So Canada specifically, tricky because I mean, I won't say tricky. It will trip you up because of number one thing I hear all the time, VAT and GST. It's a sales tax. It's a different sort of entity that Amazon will collect for you, but you have to pay on your own. So you have to go and pay the authorities once every quarter. I've heard as often as once a month, but I believe it's once a quarter if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. Um, I've seen people actually get tripped up because they haven't, for lack of a better, it's like not paying your taxes, right? Like it'll just accrue over time. You can not file it for a long time, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Well, we're still waiting on what you paid or you didn't pay us 3 years ago." That can
Yeah.
happen, especially in an age where people are trying to exit their businesses. A lot of them are like, "Do I have to make up that difference?" And I said, "Yes, and probably a penalty. I'm assuming is coming, but talk to your tax authority or talk to your accountants
Yeah.
because they're going to be the ones that are going to have to figure out those numbers."
I cannot
That
legally advise you on anything tax
I,
related.
I I personally, yeah, I'm not a lawyer. I cannot tax or legally advise you to do anything but pay your taxes.
Right.
That like you are bound to do that, and that's different. I think also what's different for lots of people is understanding what uh, you start to dip your toe into localization. And what I mean by that is translations. Because up there you have French, you have in
Yep.
Quebec specifically, you have to
Hmm.
start to understand maybe not everyone speaks their first language as English. You have to maybe build a different listing, or you have to have that listing be spoken to in French. And you have to be cognizant of some words may not translate very well, or your product may not translate well into a language, or
Localization is
images,
key
localization.
with
So
with
yeah,
with
that's the
translation. Yeah, that's what I've
absolutely.
heard.
It's the first step to like really immersing yourself in the next culture. Which again, Canada has its own culture. It's not the exact same as the United States. A lot of people like to think it is, but it's not the same. And then you
That's why
have
Amazon failed in China and why they pulled out, because Tmall and Taobao, they're native. They get Chinese culture. Amazon didn't, and so they bowed out many years ago. I mean, that's why I
right.
think
I
they
mean,
dominate so much.
exactly. I mean, if you don't understand your customer, they'll see right through you. It's just like if they see a listing, if a customer sees a listing and they know you can see right through the BS. If you're looking at a product insert when you receive a package, you're like, oh, like it's completely uh, not grammatically correct. It's all these
Yeah,
different things. It goes against TOS, whatever that might be. You're like, this doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like they've put the money, effort, and time. You lose out on a consistent customer. Even before purchase, though, you're looking at translations, images, what you're really trying to feature, what's kind of drawing to be, what's going to draw in people. Is it a family atmosphere? Is it having your lifestyle images? Is it having someone look differently, like
yeah.
tone of skin, or is it more women focused or men focused? Where you have to look at all the
That's a
metrics.
great point.
Yeah,
If you're sending something to so Singapore is English speaking, so that was a natural marketplace for us to send any of our current clients in the US to. But if all your models are white people, they're not Asian. I mean, Singapore is pretty eclectic, I think, in terms of ethnicities. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If you go into the UAE and it's all black people or white people, whatever the case might be, it's gonna look different. So thinking about changing and localizing even imagery is something I haven't thought of until just now. And so I think that's a great point.
I had this fantastic conversation with the professor from
No, you
St. Louis
didn't.
University. Yeah,
I'm
I
s
that was one. Well, I was like, I can improve it. Come on, man. You know me by now. I can prove all these things. No, this localization professor, and I asked him verbatim because he's actually worked with and he's gone with many different top 100 businesses around the world, and
Oh, wow.
he's consulted with all these different businesses in terms of localization, what that looks like, what it feels like, how to speak to this audience. And I asked him, what is the number one company that is doing it best right now in terms of localizing on like a website? And he goes, IKEA. And I thought he was joking. He's like,
Mm,
oh yeah, IKEA, the Swedish like company, big deal. But if you went on their website, we went real time, we went through everything, and it was so specific to the nature of the dialect of your actual language. It differentiates in different parts of the world, and they break that down in such a context where it will be the page format will completely change based upon
wow.
where in the precise measure of the world on what is your language. Is English in Europe or English in the United States? Is it Arabic? Is it all these different things? And it will change imagery, it will change language, it will change the look and feel of the page, of
Maybe
colors, what
products?
pop,
Products they're
products
offering?
too,
Okay.
what seasonal products are going on. Ramadan versus, is it Christmas and Ramadan, and then like you
Yeah.
have Yom Kippur, like all these different like things are going on. Different parts of the world are more prominent than the we'll say whitewashed version of what we think in the United States economy of what's going to draw in people. And that I thought was such a good touch on, you have to be knowing who your audience is. And people are like, oh yeah, like
If you wanna win
yeah.
internationally.
Well, yeah, and again, if it's brand, if you're in a Me Too product generation of, there's lots of competition, but you can stand out amongst the crowd. How are you going to
Mhm.
do that? How are you going to differentiate? They're going to look at like you, quite honestly, but if you can make it feel different, and you know for the fact that you give consideration to who your customer is, the customer is not just, I need to, like if I'm selling kids toys, it's not just going to be for that. It could be how the parent is reacting in that imagery. Like this is going to solve this problem, or this is going to make you feel this way for
Mhm.
each specific nature of where you're in. So growing internationally, you have to really start to hammer down and hone in on, how am I going to speak to this new audience? It might be just a few tweaks here, like I said, an image or two, or just wording and verbiage you use, but then also how you want it to feel to that audience. So it's always good to work with someone who knows the local culture. Again, in Canada, it's a little bit different. I would say the last thing that is somewhat difficult is just like logistics. Like it seems so crazy. There's only 30, I want to say 35 million people in Canada. Feels like there should be
Size
way
of
more because of
California
land size of
in
California.
population.
Exactly. Right. It's around that. And again, since it's worldwide, whatever that might look like, but Canada is very much spread out. So the nature of, you have to start thinking, I can't maybe fulfill things third party. I might want to do it in prime, because otherwise it might take 7 days
And
to
it's
get to you,
really expensive to
and
get
it's
stuff
expensive.
through the mountains in the cold.
Exactly.
It's not cheap.
Well, yeah, and that's why a lot of people limit exposure of selling internationally to specific parts of Canada, because if it's northern parts of the Yukon, for example, it's really difficult, and it costs prohibitive to send one-off items there, or they might have to raise the threshold. So that being said, it's just very, you have to start thinking of these nuances too of what that customer looks like, and that's where you have to start getting a little more creative of how is my product going to stand out, and maybe I should look at a different localized marketplace, maybe not Amazon right now, or maybe on Amazon, and I'm going to just be the only person in the space to dominate. It just might not have the trailblazing numbers that I might have in the United States, but that's okay, because as you start to grow these pieces, you start to add up 5% of revenue here, 10% revenue in
Yes.
Canada, or like Canada, 5% in Germany,
And getting there
3%. Yeah, it
early
starts to, yeah.
gets you better placement, and at least from an Amazon perspective, better placement, better indexation on the keywords that you're targeting. And if you can build sales history there, it can cost you, it's not guaranteed, but it can cost you less to stay there, at least in advertising, because
Mhm.
you've been there and shown that you can sell.
Well, yeah, and you're talking about people are getting priced out of ads nowadays. I hear this conversation all the time. It's very, very difficult and cost prohibitive for people to. I mean, just sourcing and logistics is a nightmare right now. But just ad costs are going up across the board in the U.S. It's not for the lack of, you can't be successful. It's just competition is so stiff
Hmm.
But if you can go to like a Singapore, we had alluded to, you can go in Australia, you can get into UAE, for example, right? Pennies on the dollar for certain kinds of products that you might be selling in the United States. You would just like clean up there. Again, may not be to the level and extent that you want or need in the United States, but as an entrepreneur, you're not trying to match apples for apples in different marketplaces. It's not
Yeah.
like I'm going to get 100% here and then I'm going to double it here and then I'm going to triple it there.
Hmm.
That's not how business works in general. You get slices of each pie and you put it together and then you that's how you grow. As long as there's consistent growth across all channels, you are just making up more of that baseline instead of like where you are at just one marketplace. So growing internationally, I always tell people when you're ready to grow internationally, it's on you. There's no number or metric that you should feel responsible to meet or hit. You need to feel comfortable that you have where you currently start out with. Again, it's selling international. If you're listening to this and you're Canada or Germany or wherever, Australia, if selling internationally to you is selling in the United States, I get that. But if you're selling in a different marketplace, like I'm selling in Australia, but then I do want to go into the United States. Not many people do that, but as you do that on your own terms, and you feel comfortable, and you know for a fact that you have those logistics and those localization things ironed out. You have to make sure that you're speaking to that audience, and then also I would suggest to you that the numbers that you have in your mind, just I would make sure you what you get and temper that. You don't have to match dollar for dollar. Again,
Yeah.
5 here, 10 here, it's all going to add up over time and you start to tweak as new things roll out. And it's also to the point you mentioned there's other marketplaces in like Europe or in different parts of the world. Amazon
There is a
started
lot. There are a lot of marketplaces in
there's a
Europe,
lot.
across Europe.
So, a statistic that was fascinating is that Amazon is not the number one marketplace in Europe, and you think
Yeah.
that's kind of crazy, but for every country, they have this own established dominant marketplace that they buy things. CD discount for France. You have, in Germany, there's like Lazada, and I'm going to say
Lazada's in the
Australia.
Philippines and
Or
Taiwan, and
Philippines,
maybe
yeah,
Australia as
APAC.
well.
APAC, I would say. I mean, eBay is actually very prominent in Asia as well as Australia and
I've heard
even Europe.
Australia, yeah, about eBay.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ones that like Mercado Libre, very prominent in Central and South America.
Yeah.
Um, Growth is coming from Amazon, right? Let's not get that wrong. Growth is coming as logistics kind of builds out. Excuse me, but understand this: if you look at the roadmap how Amazon built out its empire, first came logistics, warehousing, and whatnot, and then came the customers, if you will, the sellers, if you, and so
You
on
have
and
to
so
build
forth.
out the infrastructure first in order
The
to have the client actually get acquired.
excuse me, if you look at one cool thing, I think that most people overlook. If you look at where Amazon, so, if you're a fantasy football player, if you're not, a lot of people, or if you're a sports fan, a lot of people see value by quote unquote following the money. And what I mean by that is you're talking about contracts. If I'm a professional sports person and I'm going to start shelling out all this money for a specific player, follow that person because they see a certain value in what that asset has. Now, if you apply that to entrepreneurship, follow the where the growth is happening in terms of logistics,
Ah,
or where growth capital. So,
I like that.
United States growth of different warehousing for Amazon pretty consistent. It wasn't where it was five years ago, but it's what I think 15-20%, maybe 30% of capacity of growth for warehousing. Different ones pop up all the time, but there's significant growth happening in Australia. There's lots happening in Ireland, believe it or not. Like they're building out this logistics system where Amazon's putting warehousing. You can start to think, oh, maybe there's like this one need. Amazon sees growth in these places.
And expect
Maybe
marketing to come behind that.
expect a lot to follow behind that because it's the same playbook as what we saw when Amazon built up this ecosystem. How can I get at the end of the day, it's about the customer. How can I get my goods to you the quickest? And that's because of their logistics and supply chain that they built out this beautiful mess that everyone seems to always want to figure out. They're everywhere. You can get your products in 2 hours. You can get it in a day. You can get 2 days.
But that is really what the differentiator was with Amazon, it was
Right.
logistics. Like I always tell prospects, Amazon is a really trusted distribution network. That's essentially what they are. Yes, they have some of their own private labels. It's a very small percentage of what's selling, but Amazon has built a solid brand. And one of the things that you mentioned when you were talking about that list of things you need to do when you expand internationally, you were mentioning the differentiators and the things that help you to stand out. And that's very much about brand. If your brand is in one country, but you have to localize to another country, that's something that still needs to stay. You still have your brand and stuff like that, the identity, maybe purpose, but your target might shift a little bit. I mean, there are gonna be changes in your audience, and so if you don't, I guess what I'm getting at is the differentiation doesn't have to be technology. It doesn't have to be some new advance. The differentiation could be for you as a business, we provide a better service. We have better
Mhm.
customer service, and that's why people go to you. Hey, we actually localize and we understand your culture, and so we know why these things are more important. So we provide these goods in surplus, and these other ones aren't as important because they're not needed. So your localization or your differentiator doesn't have to be something technology based. It can just be an application or in service or medium.
Yeah, absolutely. And think about it too. United States gets all the bells and whistles first. Like if you're a seller in the United States, you're going to get access to all these fun things like posts. You're going to get things, like Vine program, all the fun new trendy stuff that you see around as a seller. Those things may not exist in other countries, but sure as hell, if they work in the United States, they'll slowly roll those out to different countries. And as they do, that's when you start to catch up with people understanding you can target based on PPC. You can start to do DSP in different marketplaces, all these different nuances that you can break through here in the United States. They're a couple of years, maybe like 2 or 3 years behind in different marketplaces around the world. So as consumers start to adopt more of Amazon, the more they will roll out those concepts of, hey, audience is now primed for these kinds of things. It is demanding of us to give more to them because there's more shoppers. We're kind of spoiled, if you will, here in the United States because we get all these cool new features. You get, Amazon Live, all this fun stuff as a seller, but as a consumer, it's almost too easy, right? Like how to consume products, but all
Yeah.
those things don't exist worldwide. So if we're stuck here in the United States, you're like, oh no, like sales are only going to exist here. That might be for certain products, but internationally, people just haven't adopted the whole wave or the nuances of Amazon.
Yeah.
That's because the world is a big blue ball, right? We're only 300 million people here in the United States.
I thought it was flat.
The rest of the world, yeah, well, depending on who you are and how you want to argue it. But
I'm
certainly,
kidding.
I've been told. Certainly, how I've been told and taught. There's lots of people here, and again, we talked about there's so many different factors that non people give a lot of credit to. If you buy online, you have to have some sort of virtual way to pay for things, right?
Yeah.
So there's a decent percentage of the world that doesn't have access to a debit card, a credit card, or any
Yeah.
sort of virtual
Bank
currency.
account, anything like
Um,
that.
exactly. So that's where you see like Western Union, like wiring money to different types of entities. You see solutions like Ping Pong, like you see different ways of how is the online ecosystem going to adapt to retail, and we're kind of bringing this full circle. Is how do you bring the retail experience online with simple facts of like how to pay for stuff?
Yep.
Our grandparents may not want a credit card because they maybe never needed one, but how are they going to buy stuff for a convenience of like I need an extra gift for Jimmy, I can't send them one, or I have to go to the post office and buy it in person, send it in the post office, and they'll mail it there. Well, now there's solutions to do that virtually, but they don't have the ability to like, do you take cash or credit? Like Amazon's not asking me if I want cash or credit. It's like,
Yep.
give me your credit card, or you,
When the
you don't get
pandemic
the again.
forced all age groups, I don't have numbers on this, but the pandemic forced all age groups to utilize e-commerce more because I mean, forced them because there was a virus out there. Everyone was told to stay home. They were forced to stay home. And so, in order to get groceries, you had to order online, or you thought instead of going to the store, I want to be safer. And so I want to order online, or I don't want to get run over for a roll of toilet paper or a roll of paper towels. So, Ryan, to summarize this, when someone's expanding internationally, they have better access. But what are those top line things that they should focus on? One was tax, VAT tax. The
Mhm.
second one I remember was localization. of your brand there, logistics? Was there anything that I missed?
Those are the major ones. I think if you can figure that out, I think it's, again, knowing who your customer is, utilizing data. I'm a big data person, so if you have to be true to what data is telling you. If it's saying that sales are lackluster because of one reason or another, really dive into it and try to figure out why. Is it because something is, or your feedback from your customer? Like if you're just ultimately listening to a customer, they're going to tell you what reasons they maybe do or do not want your product. You should have done that in the pre phase
Yeah.
of as an entrepreneur, but kind of test the markets in different parts of the world, right? Like go to social groups in Canada, for example, and if you need to ask questions to that group, say like, "Hey, I'm curious. Do people in Canada find this hockey equipment more or less
Yeah.
effective than we do? Do you care about this as much as we do in the United States?" And they're like, "Oh yeah," like in a Canadian accent. I won't even try to
Yeah.
do it right
Don't
now.
try doing that.
I'm not going to offend any Canadians listening right now, but
They'd be so nice they wouldn't even tell you anyway.
they'd be like, "That's okay, man."
Yeah.
But there's my sad attempt at Canadian accent. But they might want more comfortability. For example, if you have like hockey equipment, you want more comfortability or durability instead of in the United States, we just want it to look cool or
Yeah.
something
Or
like that.
technical
What I mean? They
aspects.
might, yeah, exactly. So I don't know, stuff like that. It really truly does matter. And then your brand, how you brand yourself should stay consistent around the world. But obviously what's important, you want to highlight those aspects, maybe one versus another, like eco-friendly, or does alleviates time spent doing one thing or another.
Yeah.
That really does matter to different cultures, different aspects. People may not even need or care for that, but that means that you don't launch in those
Yeah. It's just not the
marketplaces.
marketplace for you. All right. I got to throw to a
Right.
commercial. And I'm
Do
just
it.
kidding. We don't throw to commercials here.
You could.
Ryan, tell people we're done. That was it. Quote of the day: the world is just a big blue ball. You can take that to the bank and cash that check. If people want to find you, where can they find you? Underground, Chicago. Where should they look for
Yeah,
you?
all the hip joints in the club, wherever your local, wherever you're shopping. I don't even know what I'm trying to say. You can find like I don't know. I'm just trying to
So
mesh all
just
these
Google
different
Ryan
like thoughts in my
Cramer.
head. Google no, well, there's actually, believe it or not, lots of Ryan Cramers, which is weird to say or think. All with last name K, but my last name starts with the C. But no, you can find me on social media. You can follow me on Instagram or on LinkedIn, Facebook, and then also have a podcast I probably mentioned once or twice, or it's in the show notes or whatever you're
Crossover
going to have
Commerce,
here for
people.
this
It will be
crossover
in the show
commerce. Yeah,
notes.
yeah, you can link out to that. There's lots of audio, great content. I did
I've
a
been
weird
on the
style over
podcast
this.
before, and I gotta
You've
say,
been twice. Yeah.
it was fun. And part of the reason
Well,
why
yeah,
Ryan's here because we had a good conversation.
we had a laugh, and yeah, just I did the thing. I actually started my first. This is really gonna be weird for you. I did my first episode of my first podcast, or on my podcast, a year ago today, and now
Wow.
it's come for a
This is
circle.
our first recording, people, in case you didn't know. That's
And
crazy.
and this might be the last. We don't know. Like it might go like it can only go up from here, hopefully.
Right.
But yeah, I've done 144, and I did the math, and it was weird. It came out to be 161 working days, and then I said, how many have I done per day? And it was like 1.8 different episodes per day. So if you just start doing something, this is also like my want for entrepreneurship. If you just want to do something, start today.
Yep.
Don't wait for it, because if you're consistent in it, you can walk away with a crazy amount of either revenue, money, or whatever. So
Speaking of hockey, to end it, Wayne Gretzky said, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So take a step, people." That is
I thought
entrepreneurial
Michael
advice.
Scott said that.
Michael Scott said, Michael Jordan said, Wayne Gretzky said.
That's right. That's right.
So
That's
thank you,
right.
Ryan, for coming on the
Anyways, all
show.
legends.
Ping Pong
Exactly.
Commerce, um, Ping
Crossover
Pong
commerce,
Payments,
ping pong
excuse me,
payments. Yeah, that's
Crossover
right.
Commerce. That's where you're going to find Ryan. We
We
are
crossed over
sponsored
that.
by nobody. So enjoy this. If
Stay
you
tuned for our sponsors.
stay tuned for our sponsors next season, you can find more information about Ryan in the comments section below, or not in the comments, but you know what I'm saying. Anyway, people, I enjoyed talking with you. Ryan, I had a great time. Let's do it again.
Awesome.
Cheers. We're going to break out the champagne now. Thank you for listening to The Longer Game. We genuinely appreciate your time. And if you want to connect with us, please reach out to thelongergame.com. You can fill out a contact request form there. You can also find us on majority of the social media platforms, except for Twitter. That's the only one that we're not really on. This show is brought to you by my agency, Cartology. We're helping brands accelerate growth and become profitable on Amazon. If you'd like to know more, go to thinkcartology.com, fill out a contact form, and we'll get on the phone. That's what it's all about, connecting with you and building a relationship. This show is also brought to you by Arch DevOps. They're the ones that are helping make all the logistics of this podcast happen. We are so thankful for them. If you want to get your podcast up and running and you want to automate as many things as possible, go to archdevops.com. That's ARCHDEVOPS.com and reach out to them. They can be super, super helpful. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you have a great rest of your day and be blessed.